You know that feeling when you scroll through endless laptop listings, see a sleek chassis, a flashy 144Hz screen, a RTX 4050 badge, and start picturing yourself dominating the latest battle royale? Then you click buy, the box arrives, you fire up a game, and the performance feels underwhelming, the heat spikes, the battery dies before you finish a single match. I've been there, and that's why I'm breaking down the ASUS TUF Gaming F16 so you can avoid that disappointment. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the kind of gamer who actually needs a 16-inch laptop. If you're someone who moves between a dorm room, a coffee shop, and a friend's place, you probably can't lug around a 17-inch beast. You also don't need a workstation-grade RTX 3080, you just want smooth 1080p gameplay with a little headroom for occasional creative work. The TUF 16 slots nicely into that niche. It's not a premium flagship, but it's also not a budget notebook that cuts corners on the display or the GPU. The display is probably the first thing you'll notice. ASUS chose a 16:10 aspect ratio instead of the more common 16:9, which means you get roughly 10% more vertical space. In practical terms, that extra lines make a difference when you're browsing the web, checking Discord, or editing a YouTube thumbnail. No more constant scrolling. The panel is a Full HD Plus 19201200 IPS-Level screen with a 144Hz refresh rate and 100% sRGB coverage. For fast-paced shooters like Valorant or Apex Legends, the high refresh really translates into smoother motion and less perceived blur. In my tests, the screen held up well under bright sunlight, which is a nice bonus for anyone who likes to game outside or near windows. Now, performance. The laptop pairs an 11th Gen Intel Core i5210H with an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4050. The i5210H is a low-power useries chip, which means it's designed to keep thermals in check rather than push raw clocks. For most modern titles at 1080p, the RTX 4050 handles medium to high settings without breaking a sweat, delivering 7080 frames per second in games like Cyberpunk 2077 on low to medium presets. However, because the CPU isn't a high-end series part, you'll notice a dip in games that lean heavily on single-core performance, such as certain strategy titles or older RPGs that aren't well optimized for multi-threading. If you plan to stream while you play, the combination can start to feel cramped. You'll likely need to drop some graphics settings to keep the frame rate stable. Thermal management is where ASUS leans into its TUF branding. The laptop comes with arcflow fans for exhaust vents, and 5 dedicated heat pipes that spread heat across the chassis. In real-world usage, the fans stay reasonably quiet during light tasks, typing, browsing, or watching videos, and they ramp up in a controlled way when you launch a game. You won't hear the screaming whine that some thin gaming laptops exhibit, but you will feel a modest increase in temperature on the palm rests after an hour of continuous gaming. The cooling system does its job well enough that the GPU stays around the 75-80 range during typical 1080p sessions, which is healthy for longevity. Speaking of longevity, the TUF line is built to meet MILST 810H military-grade durability tests. That translates to reinforced hinges, a reinforced chassis, and resistance to everyday bumps. For a student or a commuter who tosses the laptop into a backpack daily, that robustness can be a real peace-of-mind factor. It's not a guarantee against a drop from a desk, but it does mean the chassis won't creak or flex after a few months of regular transport. On the memory and storage side, the F16 ships with 16GB of DDR5 RAM and a 512GB PCIe Gen 4 SSD. DDR5 gives you faster bandwidth compared to DDR4, which helps with loading times and multitasking, especially when you have a browser full of tabs open while a game runs in the background. The SSD is noticeably speedy. Windows boots in under 15 seconds, and loading a large map in a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 feels snappy. The downside is the capacity. 512GB can fill up quickly if you install several modern games, each taking 4060GB, plus you'll want space for videos, music, and possibly some creative software. You'll need an external drive or an upgrade if you plan to keep a large library on the internal drive. Connectivity is solid for a mid-range machine. Wi-Fi 6 ensures lower latency and higher throughput on newer routers.